Welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining us today because, well, we're about to decode the actual operating system of our minds. You know that feeling when you wonder why you just did something or why you're suddenly feeling a certain way? Today, we're unpacking exactly that, using the revolutionary blueprints drawn up by the 20th century Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung. We're literally going to map out the human psyche, starting right at the surface and then taking a deep dive all the way down into its darkest depths. Let's get into it.
So I want to start by asking you a really fundamental question. Who is actually driving your mind, right? We all feel like we're in the driver's seat, making conscious choices. But if we're being honest, just a little bit of introspection usually reveals that a lot of the time, we're not driving at all. We're just coasting on autopilot, following this deeply built-in navigation system that completely exceeds our conscious knowledge and understanding.
Okay, let's dive into this. Think of your mind as a high-tech navigation system. The part of you that's listening to me right now, your conscious awareness, is really just that tiny lit-up display screen sitting on the dashboard. But underneath that screen, there is a massive, incredibly complex software running on even more complex hardware. And here's the thing, if we don't try to understand this hidden system, how it works, where it's desperately trying to take us, and how to override it when it's sending us in the wrong direction, we risk aimlessly wandering through life. Best case scenario, we end up somewhere uninteresting. Worst case, absolute disaster.
Section 1. Contextualizing Jung. To really grasp this internal software, we first need to look at the man who actually dared to map it from the top down.
Jung's journey to mapping the mind was, to put it mildly, intensely personal and incredibly turbulent. So, in 1907, he meets Sigmund Freud, and they talk for 13 hours straight the very first time they meet, which, honestly, is either the greatest first date in history or an absolute nightmare. But that intense conversation sparked a deep professional bond. Freud was older, so it naturally became this father-son dynamic. By 1913, though, Jung really wanted his professional independence. Plus, he had this much more mystical view of the mind compared to Freud's very strict, scientific, reductionist approach. So they had a massive, incredibly painful split. And following that breakup, Jung actually suffered a profound midlife psychological breakdown. But here's the crazy part. Instead of running from it, he leaned in. He spent years introspecting, basically experimenting on himself, exploring the deepest recesses of his own unconscious. And it was that intensely turbulent period that concretized the very map we're looking at today.
Section 2, the surface level, ego and persona. So let's start up at the top, right at that dashboard display screen, the stuff we consciously experience every single day.
So the crucial point is that right at the very center of your conscious awareness sits the ego. It's your sense of personal distinction. You can think of the ego as the ultimate storyteller. Its main job, 24/7, is to maintain continuity in your identity. It actively curates the story you tell yourself about yourself just so you can feel like a cohesive, consistent human being from one day to the next.
But you know, the ego doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has to deal with the outside world, and that is where the persona comes in. The persona is that outward appearance you actively display to society. If Jung were alive today, he'd probably call this your LinkedIn self or your highly curated Instagram profile. It's the character your ego decides you should be to fit into a certain role or meet societal expectations. But Jung warns us, and this is absolutely vital to remember, this mask is rarely who you actually are. It is deeply, fundamentally disjointed from your true self.
Section 3. The Descent. Exploring the unconscious realm. Okay, so we're leaving that bright, surface-level display screen now, and we're taking a step down the stairwell, right into the dark basement of the mind.
To maintain that pristine, perfectly acceptable persona we were just talking about, the ego has to act as a completely ruthless filter. It takes all these various components of our personal experience, the feelings, the intrusive thoughts, the urges that just don't fit that nice societal mask, and it heavily represses them. Basically, anything the ego decides is inappropriate just gets shoved down the stairs and locked away in the unconscious realm.
And this brilliantly illustrates one of Jung's most profound insights. Once we're down there in the unconscious, he realized it's actually split into two distinct structures. First, there's the personal unconscious. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's the storage facility for your own repressed personal memories and your own undesirable experiences. But underneath that is the collective unconscious. Jung argued that we actually inherit universal elements from the sum total of human history.
Through this massive, unbroken chain of psychological imitation going all the way back to the dawn of humanity, we inherit psychological structures, universal symbols, and archetypes. So we don't just carry around our own personal baggage, we're carrying the psychological structures of literally all of humanity.
Section 4. In the basement. Confronting the shadow. Let's keep walking further down those dark stairs into the absolute deepest, most concealed part of your mind.
This brings us to a foundational concept in this explainer, the shadow. The shadow contains all that repressed, denied, completely unknown content that your ego absolutely refuses to identify with. And let's just be completely direct here for a second. This place holds all your potential faults, your hidden wickedness, your most shameful interests, and frankly, the exact traits you utterly despise when you see them in other people. Like, if you fiercely hate a specific trait in someone else, Jung would actually suggest that trait is likely lurking right here, completely unacknowledged in your own shadow.
Jung actually had a really beautiful, haunting way of putting this. He said it is only at night that no shadows exist. Think about that for a second. The shadow is cast by the light of our own consciousness. It's a permanent, inescapable, and perfectly natural part of human nature. You simply cannot have a solid, real personality without casting a shadow.
Now, what's really interesting and frankly terrifying about this is the immense danger of denial. Because you cannot outrun your psychological shadow any more than you can outrun the physical shadow cast by your own body on the sidewalk. When you try to run back up those stairs in denial, when you actively disregard your dark side, you're actually giving it power. As Jung noted, repressing small evils turns them into big ones. Ignorance just allows the shadow to sneak up the stairs entirely uninvited, and it will sabotage your life in ways you simply won't consciously understand. To truly heal, to actually fix your internal software, you first have to admit that there's a sickness.
Section 5. Individuation. Becoming your true self. All right, so how do we fix it? Let's transition from the problem to the solution, to Jung's ultimate goal for human life.
That ultimate goal is realizing the self. In Jungian psychology, the self is the combined, authentic totality of both your unconscious and your conscious realms. It's who you actually are, what you actually desire, and what you are actually capable of. The entire fundamental goal of life is to get your ego and your persona as incredibly close to this authentic totality as humanly possible.
Let's move to the next step and see how this builds, because Jung called this actionable process individuation, and it happens in 3 distinct steps. It starts with radical self-honesty, which means you have to critically examine your feelings and actions and accept what they truly say about you, even when it's really ugly. Step 2 is actually confronting that dark shadow we talked about down in the basement. And step 3 is integrating it. See, you don't banish your shadow, you integrate its truths to achieve wholeness. Make no mistake, admitting that you're not completely who you want to be, that is a profoundly difficult task that literally shakes the core of the psyche. But it is, without a doubt, life's greatest and most necessary endeavor.
And that brings our entire metaphor full circle. By doing this incredibly difficult shadow work, by integrating the dark with the light, you are finally accessing the raw code of your mental software. You're getting in there and fixing the bugs in your psychological navigation system. By understanding your true self, you finally gain access to the actual controls. And that means you can finally input your true destination coordinates, instead of just blindly following some repressed autopilot. So, I want to leave you with a lingering thought to carry with you as this explainer finishes. I want you to look inward today. Ask yourself honestly, what hidden...
Welcome to the